I'm glad to see you. There's a kind of electricity in the air. Do you feel the electricity? I mean, I like that. A friend of mine told me about a little boy that was in her class who was asked to write an essay on Benjamin Franklin. And the kid wrote, Benjamin Franklin was born in Boston, but he didn't like it there, so he went to Philadelphia. He bought a loaf of bread, he walked up the street, he met this lady, he married her, and discovered electricity. The name of the game is work. Everybody works. And I want to talk about work in Christian perspective. I want to talk about why we work and what we can accomplish in work and what we hope work will do for us as persons. Most of us have been reared on what has been called the Protestant work ethic. That's because a guy named Max Weber, one of the great sociologists of all times, noticed that there was something about Protestants that made them very, very hardworking types. He looked at Europe and he saw that the Protestants, particularly the Calvinists among the Protestants, were the hardest working people in Europe. If you've been to Europe, you know what I mean. I've been to Europe. Been to Switzerland, which is like the epitome of Protestantism. Geneva, Zurich, these Protestant centers. Have you ever been over there? I mean, in Zurich, everybody works. Everything works. It's scary. We got on a train at Zurich, and when the Swiss say a train is going to leave at 12:04, the train leaves at? They never mess. We got in a train, we crossed the Alps. Our first stop in Italy was Milan. We pulled into the train station. It was supposed to quickly proceed on to Rome. We sat there for 3 hours because my Italian paisans could not find an engine. They couldn't find an engine. And I didn't mind that. It's that nobody cared. People were pulling out accordions, bottles of wine, loaf of bread. They're dancing up and down the aisle. They're having a good time. I'm nervous wreck. I'm saying to the conductor, what's going on? Why aren't we leaving? Hey, there's no engine. I said, is anybody looking? That's not my job. You know. I mean, it's very relaxed. It's very fun. Weber noticed this, and he asked, what is it about Protestantism that makes us into such intense workers, such hardworking people? And he found it in our theology. The first thing is, he said, Protestants, particularly the Calvinistic variety, believe in the sovereignty of God, predestination. Ever hear that doctrine? The Protestant doctrine is that God knows who's going to be saved and who's going to be lost before they're ever born. Now, the corollary to that is point number 2. Here it is. If God knows who's going to be saved and who's going to be lost, it leaves a very serious question on our hands. How do I know whether I'm one of the elect? How do I know whether God has chosen me for salvation? How do I know that I'm saved? How can I have assurance of my salvation? The Protestant answer, and this is an incredible answer, the Protestant answer in America has been this: those who are chosen by God, those who are elect, those who are saved, quote unquote, will know that they are the elect, will know that they are saved by virtue of the fact that they prosper. Is that mind-boggling? Economic prosperity becomes evidence of divine election. Riches in America has a religious meaning. Riches isn't just convenient, it's spiritual. I mean, it's not just inconvenient to be poor, it's condemnable. I mean, nothing is worse in America than dying penniless. Dying penniless. I was with my daughter in Chicago, and we're taking the Gray Line tour of the city. And the tour guide is giving us the whole bit. And we got to the Tower Town section of the city, and there's a theater there. And in the alley alongside of the theater, John Dillinger was gunned to death. You remember the story of John Dillinger, this great gangster. And the tour guide, with great enthusiasm, was saying, ladies and gentlemen, in that alley, John Dillinger was gunned to death after robbing over $300,000 from banks throughout the Midwest. After robbing $300,000, ladies and gentlemen, when they gunned him down, he had spent it all on riotous living. He had wasted all on riotous living. And out of $300,000, are you listening to me, he said, He only had 32 cents left to his name. Out of 300,000, when they killed him, he only had 32 cents left. And my daughter, in a whisper that was audible to everyone on the bus, said, "What great timing." I mean, isn't that true? If you're going to get blown away, isn't it ideal to get blown away just when the money's running out? You know what I mean? Somebody says, and when he died, he was worth over $4 million. When you die, you ain't worth nothing. There is a value to the accumulation of wealth in America. Somehow they get this crazy idea that the richer you get, the more spiritual you are. I mean, that God, in fact, makes people rich. You know, I don't buy that junk. And for good reason. I go into the hills of Haiti. I see people who love Jesus in ways that would shame you. I've been to the mission field. I see people in Africa who love the Lord in ways that make us inferior by comparison. And yet these people who love Jesus, who serve Jesus with their whole heart, mind, and soul, are poor as can be. I would say this, that if you follow Jesus, he doesn't promise you're going to become rich. As a matter of fact, he says this, "The foxes have holes, the birds have nests. You follow me, you just may not end up with a place to lay your head." Remember, when you become a Christian, you become the follower of one who was rich, but for our sakes became poor. None of the disciples, none of the apostles ever ended up as millionaires in this world. They all ended up stripped and battered and beaten and impoverished, and they counted it all but gain. People, the Protestant ethos somehow attaches spiritual significance to getting rich and makes us into people who desire the accumulation of wealth, not just for its convenience, but for what it says to us about our spiritual state of being. That's what Max Weber saw. The next thing is that he said there is the doctrine of calling. Now, I'm a real Protestant because I believe in the doctrine of calling. That is, the Protestant mindset says you should work hard. Because when you work, you're not working for your employer, you're working for God. I buy that. I like that. I believe that. I grew up on that, singing, "Be careful, little hands, what you do." Do you know that song? "Be careful, little hands, what you do. The Lord is up above. He is looking down on love." Remember this in Daily Vacation Bible School? So be careful, little hands, what you do. That song ruined my dating life. I mean, every time I was ready to make a move, I heard this voice say, "Be careful." But God was watching you. See, that was the great thing. God is watching you. And therefore, when you work, you must recognize that you're not working for your boss who may or may not be watching. What you do, you're doing as a service to God, and he is always watching you. And so the book of James says, when you work, work is unto the Lord. It says that in Colossians as well. The last thing is that you're never allowed to waste your money if you're a Protestant. We have this doctrine of thrift. So you're supposed to work hard. You're supposed to make a lot of money, but you're never supposed to spend it. You're supposed to invest it so that you'll have more money. That's incredible, you know, this doctrine of thrift. You know, that's why we Protestants are against gambling, and I am against gambling because it's a waste of money. I was in Las Vegas as a speaker. I got off the plane, and this minister met me at the plane, and he took me to the hotel, all the way to the hotel. He was telling me about the evils of gambling. And I buy into that, the evils of gambling, how horrible it was, how people were messing up their lives because of gambling and trying to get something for nothing, not working for their money, trying to gamble for their money, wasting God's money. And I buy everything he said. He put me up in the MGM Hotel, which is like the center of gambling. He explained to me that they try to lure people into the hotel with cheap room rates. And since I didn't gamble, I could get a cheap room and give the money to missions. I thought that was wonderful. Next morning, he was supposed to pick me up. I'm downstairs waiting, just waiting for him to pick me up. I'm just standing there waiting. And gambling's going on all around me. The slot machines are going, the gambling, everything's in high gear. As I'm standing there, waiting for this preacher to come and pick me up, looking through the glass doors, seeing if he's arriving, I'm just standing there. I felt this quarter in my pocket. People, we're not talking big money here. We're talking one lousy quarter. I had this quarter, and I must admit, I was overtaken by the evil one, and I put the quarter in the machine. I mean, just for kicks, you know what I mean? And I pulled the handle. I'm not expecting to win anything. I just wanted to, to say, hey, I threw a quarter in the machine. I pulled the handle, and I hit the jackpot. And when you hit the jackpot on one of these slot machines in Las Vegas, you don't just get quarters. A bell goes off, boom, 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 and this a light starts flashing, this strobe light, boom, 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 and the light's flashing, boom, 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 and these quarters are pouring out of the machine, and man, I'm grabbing these quarters, and I'm grabbing them, and I'm shoving them in my pocket, and as I'm shoving these quarters in my pocket, I looked out the glass door, and that preacher was coming at me. And I said, Lord, why are you doing this to me? You know I would give the money to missionaries. And I want to tell you, people, you see these hands are swift hands. I was able to get the last quarter in my pocket before that preacher could come through the door. I got it in. And then I realized what $50 in quarters does to a jacket. I went around the rest of the day holding up my jacket. You're not supposed to gamble. You're not supposed to waste that money. You're not supposed to be extravagant. You're not supposed to buy expensive things. You're supposed to live in a frugal fashion. Well, you put it together, says Max Weber. If people work hard because they see their jobs as a calling, if they don't waste their money but invest it, they will get rich. And the richer they get, the more convinced that they will be that they are saved, that they're the elect. And so we have what we call a wealth-generating cycle. Now, I'm not knocking it. That wealth-generating cycle that every economist, every sociologist understands. This is the way religion has fostered the prosperity of America. It is a great thing. I'm not sure it's completely biblical. I know that hard work for God is biblical, but I'm not convinced that making a lot of money is biblical. I think with John Wesley that it is the obligation of every Christian to work as hard as he can, to make as much money as he can, to what? Give away all he can. You say, what are you suggesting? That it's some kind of sin to buy a BMW? I think you ought to think twice about that question. I have to ask a very simple question in return. If Jesus had $45,000 and he knew the kids were starving in Haiti, what kind of car would he buy? What would he do with the money? Please, I'm not telling you the answer. You have to answer. You have to answer what Jesus would do if he was in your place, because to be a Christian is to do with your wealth what Jesus would do if Jesus was in your place. Is it as simple as that? As direct as that? The accumulation of wealth. You say, what are you driving at? Why are you hitting this so hard? Because we live in a strange era, a strange time in history. We live in the age of the yuppie. Young, upperly mobile professional. They're all going to graduate and get those jobs and move up the corporate ladder. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. Somebody's got to do it. But I'm worried about American youth because I think they're buying into a value system that is anti-biblical. I think that after they climb the corporate ladder, after they get that house in suburbia, after they buy that automobile, after they get all of these things, a voice may echo down the corridors of time and ask a very simple question. What doth it profit you if you gain the whole world and lose your own soul? That is scary business. Please, there's nothing wrong with being successful. There's nothing wrong with making money. I'm not putting that down. I am saying that if somehow we are caught up in this ethos that the accumulation of wealth, that being hardworking, that having a good position, that having a title, that having status is what life is all about, I think you're going to wake up one day and find out that you sold your soul for a bowl of pottage. When I look at people I have to say to them what Jesus said to them. Why do you spend your money for that which satisfieth not? I have to say to this generation, more than any other generation, do you not understand that it's harder for rich people to enter into the kingdom of heaven than for a camel to go through the eye of a needle? Do you not grasp the message that life is more than what you eat and what you drink and what you wear? That in fact life is more than wearing expensive clothes. Life is more than eating gourmet foods. Life is more than going to Club Med. Club Med is okay, I guess, but life is more than that. There are some people who are working hard to accumulate wealth, to move up the corporate ladder because they think that this will give them a sense of inner gratification and fulfillment. Now, during the 60s, there was a group of people that emerged. They were kind of counterculture types. They were hippies. Please, I've got nothing against hippies. I envy them. I mean, there's all that hair. Horrible. When you talk to the hippies, they came up with a whole different work ethic. They said the accumulation of wealth is okay, but there's something more important than accumulating money. It's personal gratification. Are you fulfilled in your work? Now, I can relate to that. I can buy into that. Because so many people in the society have jobs that really do not give them a sense of fulfillment. Paul Goodman, one of the great sociologists of our time, argues that 83% of Americans have jobs that they basically despise. If you don't believe me, go down the front in Maine and watch people on their way to work. Watch them when they stop at the traffic light. Watch them as they sit there. Not many of them are smiling and saying, this is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. Most people are trying to stretch their coffee breaks because their jobs are absurd. You probably don't even remember when jobs were fulfilling for you in many instances. I had a little boy, and when my boy was a little tyke, he used to go to school and he used to make things. You know how kids make things? He used to bring home this chunk of clay painted green. Dad, I made it for you. What is it, Bart? It's an elephant. And so you would take the elephant and you would do what with it? Put it on the refrigerator. Have you ever analyzed the sociological significance of refrigerators in American homes? Have you ever asked what is the real function of a refrigerator? You think its real function is to keep food cool. You are wrong. The real function of a refrigerator is to be a museum piece. Paintings, pictures, artifacts are put on refrigerators, held there with little magnets. I made it. Did you ever see a kid make something? Have you ever seen the joy and the excitement of being creative, of doing something that is creative? And you put it there, and he's so proud, and it keeps on accumulating. All his junk keeps on accumulating until company comes, and you take it all off the refrigerator, and you put it in a box, and you put it in the basement, and your kid comes home and looks at the refrigerator and says, "Where's my stuff?" And you say, "It's in the basement in the box." "Where?" And he goes down and he gets it, and he walks by you. And he gives you this dirty look. Because these things which he created are not just things. They are extensions of his own personality. They are creations of his own imagination. They are extensions of who he is. The joy of being creative. People are made in the image of God. And God is a creator. God got his jollies out of creation. And to be a follower of Jesus is to be somebody who likewise gets joy out of creation. You are created by God to be a creative person because you're in his image, and he's a creative person. And the question that the hippie asked, which is a good question, is do you find that when you work, your creative juices flow? Do you find a sense of joy and fulfillment in what you produce? That is a good question. When Christopher Wren designed and built the great cathedral, St. Paul's Cathedral in England, he visited the site one day when it was in process of construction, and there was a man mixing mortar. And he asked the man who was mixing the mortar, "What are you doing?" And this man who was only mixing cement, not knowing it was Christopher Wren, looked up and said, "What am I doing? Can't you see what I'm doing?" "Sir, I am building a great cathedral." When you go to your job, do you feel like you're doing something great, something important, something significant? You say, "Is that important? After all, the most important thing is to come home with a good paycheck." No, it isn't. The most important thing to bring home from a job is yourself. And a lot of people never come home from their jobs because they die at their jobs. Little by little by little, they get no joy, they get no satisfaction. You say, but it's a job. It may be a job, but God has called you to live life with fulfillment and abundance. And if your job isn't giving you a sense of fulfillment, I have to ask a very serious question. Isn't it time to ask whether or not your job should offer you something more than you're getting? That's a very good question. My goodness, if a person doesn't like his work, if a person's job does not give him, does not give her a sense of satisfaction and fulfillment, that person's in bad shape. You know why? I'll tell you this, right from the top. As a sociologist, I know that a major cause of marital disruption is when people don't have any fulfillment in their work. You understand that? If a person's job doesn't give him, doesn't give her any sense of fulfillment, that person will be emotionally drained at the end of the day. And if you're emotionally drained at the end of the day, you have nothing to give to your mate. You have nothing to give to your children. You become, in the words of T.S. Eliot, the hollow men, the hollow women, the people that are blown to and fro by the wind. You've got to come home alive, fulfilled. You've got to vibrate with the excitement that has been generated by your work. At the end of the day, you have to have the sense that God is saying to you, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant." You've got to have that emotional gratification from your work. And if you don't have it, you'll be a lousy mate, you'll be a lousy parent. I mean, you can't love people unless you are emotionally alive. And if your job is emotionally killing you, you have to ask whether it's worth it, because the most important thing you give to your family is not a paycheck, but yourself. There is some truth to the hippie value system. When a person works, money is not a sufficient reward. It's okay, but there's got to be more to it than that. There's got to be more to it than that. And I want to press that and say, well, I'm not a hippie. I do see some validity to their work ethic. So we have the Protestant work ethic, which says accumulate wealth, because wealth gives you a sense of spiritual identity. You've got the hippie work ethic that says, if you're going to take a job, make sure it turns you on, make sure it gives you a sense of fulfillment, make sure it gives you a sense of gratification, because if you don't have a job that gives you a sense of gratification and fulfillment, you will not be able to relate to other people in any significant way. I buy truth in both of them. But I think that Christianity calls us beyond them both. I think that Christianity says it's okay to make money as long as you handle it responsibly. As long as you use your money as Jesus would use your money if Jesus had that money in his hands. I remember reading a book when I was a kid called In His Steps by Sheldon. I don't know, have any of you read that book, In His Steps? Oh, a lot of you have. And that book was given to me by a teacher. I think I was in the 8th grade. This teacher gave me this book. I mean, neat teacher, had these shoulders that were 78 inches across, huge muscles, a mustache. Her name was, it wasn't a she, it was a he. Gave me this book, In His Steps, which said very simply, to be a Christian is to do whatever Jesus would do if Jesus was in your shoes. That's reducing it to its lowest level. That's good stuff. And so I made that commitment. Thus, if you make a lot of money, you have to ask yourself, if Jesus was in my shoes, if he had this money, how would he spend it? I think churches need to ask that question. Before they put in a $50,000 stained glass window, they have to ask, if Jesus had this $50,000, would he buy the stained glass window or would he feed the kids in Haiti? And you should do what Jesus would do if Jesus was in your place. Isn't that good enough? Nothing wrong with making a lot of money. As long as you say, Jesus, this is your money, what would you do if you had it? And to use it as Jesus would use it. Secondly, I think it's great to have a job that gives you a sense of personal fulfillment, a sense of personal aggrandizement that enhances your humanity, to use the in phrases of today's culture. But I think Christianity takes us beyond that. It says, don't work for money. Don't work for your own personal aggrandizement. Work for other people in the name of Jesus Christ. That's what he says. He says, look, give yourself to other people in my name. Interestingly enough, the more you live for other people, the more you give yourself to other people, the more fulfilled you will be. I want to tell you something about you that you may not even know about yourself. When God designed you, he made you like he is. He made you in his image. You know what that means? That means you have been designed to get your greatest gratification and fulfillment out of living for other people. See, God is a giver. John 3:16 said, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. He is a giver. God gets his jollies out of giving. That's neat. I mean, God is creative. God gets his thrill out of creating things for other people. You know, sometimes I think that God is the only child left in the universe. And all the rest of us have grown old and cynical because of sin. God creates in a childlike fashion. He gets his joy out of creating stuff for us. And he's childlike in his excitement. I want to ask you what Lord Chesterton asked. Lord Chesterton asked this question. How do you think God created daisies? Do you think he just snapped his fingers and said, daisies be? How boring. Or did God create one daisy and something inside of him said, do it again. So he created daisy number 2 and something inside of him said, do it again. And then he created daisy number 4 and number 5 and he was still saying with every daisy what? After he created 50 billion trillion daisies, something inside of him was still screaming, what? Hey, that's the kind of God we got. He can do the same thing over and over and over again, but if he's doing it for people, and if he's doing it out of love, if he's doing it out of creative emotion for the well-being of others, what? He is never bored. He is alive with excitement. The creativity of God is a creativity that he wants to exist in you. He wants everything that you do and everything that you create and everything that you work for to be a service to other people in his name. God created you to get your jollies out of creating for others, out of doing for others, out of being for others, out of serving for others. And if you don't serve other people, you'll never be fulfilled. No. I worry about yuppies because they have a get mentality and they've been raised on it. Your parents said to you what? Go to school and get a good education. And you say, why? Well, if you can get a good education, you can get a job. And after you get the job, you will then be able to get a lot of. And after you get a lot of money, you'll be able to get all the things that this media and culture has trained you to crave. And after you get all of these things, you're supposed to get happy. That's what they told you. You have a getting mentality. But I want to tell you that God created you to be a giver, not a getter. And here's the culture saying, get. And here's Jesus saying, give. And if you don't live according to the will of God, you will never be fulfilled no matter how much you get and no matter how much you seek fulfillment. M. Scott Peck, one of the leading psychotherapists of our time, describes a young woman that was coming to him regularly for counseling. And she would come time and time again, and more and more depressed with each visit. One day she walked into the office and she was vibrant with joy. And he said, "What's happened?" "Oh," she said, on the way here, my pastor dropped me off at the hospital and we made visits. And I talked to people. And I prayed with people. And I read scripture to people all morning on my way here. And it was just the most wonderful morning." And Dr. Peck said, "Oh, that's great. Now we know how you can overcome your depression." And her response was, "You don't expect me to do this every day, do you?" Isn't it interesting that people know what will make them happy and refuse to do it? Isn't that horrible? People know what will make them happy and refuse to do it. This is why I believe in Satan. Only Satan could twist our thinking so that we could reject doing the very things we know will give us joy and excitement and aliveness. When Mother Teresa was interviewed by one of the leading news analysts of the world, the news analyst said, "Mother Teresa, I wouldn't do what you are doing for all the money in the world." And she smiled and said, "Neither would I." There is a reason that transcends the accumulation of wealth. There's a reason that transcends self-actualization that when it comes to work. And I'm saying to a whole generation of young people and to old people and to middle-aged people, hey, isn't it time that you took seriously evaluating why you work and what you expect to get out of your work? Isn't it time that you committed your life without reservation to serving Jesus Christ and serving other people in his name? I have a particular discovery that is crucial to me, and it is this: that whenever I look at a human being, any human being, if I look twice and if I look deeply, I sense something wonderful. I sense Jesus coming at me through that person. I don't believe that person is Jesus, but I believe that Jesus uses people in a sacramental way and gives us an opportunity to love him by loving other people. And that's why he says, "Inasmuch as ye do it unto the least of these, you're doing it unto me." I read a story the other day, an incredible story, about a little boy who was gathered up by the Nazis in Poland. He was a Jewish boy, and he was lined up with his parents and friends and all the Jewish people from his community, and the SS troops machine gunned the whole lot of them down. And they fell into a shallow grave and were buried. But the bullets never hit this little boy. They thought he was dead because his body was completely covered, splattered with the blood of his parents. As he lay there low in the grave, they buried him. But he was close enough to the surface he could breathe. And at night, when everybody was gone, this little 10-year-old boy dug his way out of the grave, naked and covered with his parents' blood. He went running to the nearest house and knocked on the door. The woman of the household opened the door and saw him and recognized him as one of the Jews who had just been rounded up for death, slammed the door, and as she slammed the door, she said, "Go away, we don't want any trouble." He went to another house, and it was the same kind of response. "Leave us alone. If we take you in, we will be in trouble with the Nazis." House after house turned him away, this dirty little hungry boy, naked in the cold, almost dying of exposure. And as he told the story in the article that I read, he said, and he's a Jewish boy, he said, "I don't know what made me say it. I know what made him say it." He said, "But the next house I went to, when I knocked on the door, and the woman answered, I said, 'Don't you recognize me?' I'm Jesus, who you say you love. And when I said that, she took me in her arms and she brought me into the house and she closed the door. And from that day on, she took care of me as though I was her own child. You know what I want you to do? I want you to go out into this world, not to make money primarily, although making money is important. Not to seek self-actualization, even though self-actualization is very important. I want you to go out into the world and to serve people. And you will serve people if every time you look at a person, you see Jesus coming at you through that person. Jesus uses people as vehicles of communicating himself to us. And as we love those people, we love Jesus. You know, it'll change your whole style. A passage of scripture that really speaks to me is 1 John 3, 17 and 18. If you have this world's goods, and you can look over there, and you can see a person in deep need, and you do not respond to that person's need and share what you have and give what you have and sacrifice yourself for that person, how can you say you have the love of God in your heart? That's a good question. How can you say that? See, people say, I love Jesus, I love Jesus, I love Jesus. Jesus says, wait a minute, you love me? I'm over here waiting to be loved. That's why you have to respond to the hungry. That's why you have to respond to the suffering. That's why you have to respond to the lonely. But more than that, it's not just a thing here and a thing there that I ask you to do. I ask you to give your entire life to Jesus. I beseech you, therefore, brothers and sisters, by the mercies of God, that ye present yourselves as living sacrifices, holy and acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. It's the only reasonable thing to do. You say, why? Let me tell you why. A friend of mine, Ian Barclay, describes being on a train leaving Victoria Station in London. He's about 10 minutes out of the station when the two young men sitting across from him in the compartment have something strange happen. One of them has an epileptic seizure. I don't know whether you've ever seen anybody have an epileptic seizure. He just began to tremble. And he rolled off the seat onto the floor and trembled and trembled and trembled. His friend lifted him up and put him back on the seat, wiped the beads of perspiration from his brow, put a pillow behind his head, covered him with a blanket, and then turned to my friend Ian Barclay and said, forgive us. I didn't think this would happen. He has a seizure like this about once a month, and he just had one 2 days ago. I didn't think he would have another one so soon. My friend Ian Barclay said, don't worry about it. He said, you don't understand. My friend here and I were in Vietnam together. He's English, I'm an American. We were both wounded. He said, my leg was blown off, and he pulled up his trousers and showed this artificial leg. He said, my friend here had shrapnel all across his chest. A hand grenade had gone off and blown away half of his chest. And the MASH helicopter that was coming to rescue us was blown out of the sky, and we knew we were going to die. I don't know how he did it, mister, this young man said, but my friend here somehow got to his feet and grabbed me by my shirt and began to pull me through the jungle, step by step, almost inch by inch. And at every step I heard him cry in pain and agony because of the shrapnel that was in his chest. I kept on saying him, let me alone, let me die. You're going to die with me. If you can get out of here, but we can't both get out of here. And he kept saying to me, if you die, I die with you. And he got me out of the jungle. 3 years ago, I found out he had this condition, so I sold my house and I sold my furniture. I took what money I had out of the bank. He said, I'm single. I could do it. He said, I came over here to take care of him because he needs somebody with him all the time. And I'm with him all the time. And that's our story. My friend Ian Barclay said, you don't have to apologize to me. That's the most noble and beautiful story I ever heard. And And the young man said, "Hey, shucks, man. Shucks, you don't understand. After what he did for me, there isn't anything I wouldn't do for him." People, that's a great line. That's a great line. After what he did for me, there isn't anything I wouldn't do for him. Do you understand what Jesus did for you? Do you understand that they drove nails through his hands? They put a spear in his side. Do you understand the agony of nailing a man spread eagle to a Roman gibbet? And they took thorns and they made a crown and they pulled it down over his scalp. And as he hung there in agony, as he hung there in pain, as he hung there in excruciating agony, he was thinking only of you. He was thinking only of you. And after what he did for you, you ought to be able to stand up and say, "Jesus, after what you've done for me, there isn't anything I wouldn't do for you." I'm not asking you to make money. I'm not asking you to be self-actualized. I'm asking you to take your lives and lay them on the line and say, "Jesus, whatever you want me to be, I will be. Wherever you want me to go, I will go. Whatever you want me to do, I will do. I'm yours, Lord. I'm yours." It's your only reasonable sacrifice. People of God, I saw that play, Death of a Salesman. Did you ever see that play by Arthur Miller? And when they bury Willie Loman after he commits suicide, his wife says to her son Biff, Biff, why did he do it? Why did he do it, Biff? Why did he do it? And he says, "Ah, shucks, Mom. Ah, shucks. He had all the wrong dreams. He had all the wrong dreams." If there's anything I would say to an emerging yuppie culture is, don't you understand? You've got all the wrong dreams. All the wrong dreams. The Bible says, and when the young men dream dreams and the young women dream dreams and the old people have visions, then it's good. But when the young people don't have dreams and the old people don't have visions, the people, my goodness, you may climb the corporate ladder, you may make it to the top, but when you get there, if you haven't lived out the dream that Jesus gave you, the vision that Jesus gave you, I say you're a loser. You're a loser even though the world calls you a winner. I'm here to say something as directly and as forthrightly as I know how to say it. Jesus has called you to live out your life for him. People, they need you among the poor and the oppressed. They need you among the suffering and the hurting. They need you out there. Jesus waits to be loved. Jesus waits to be encountered. Jesus waits to be served. I want to tell you, God has already given you a vision. God has already given you a dream. God has already provided a calling. But most of us here have for years been fighting and resisting the wonderful thing that God has called us to be and do. Be honest. Isn't it true that one time, one place, sometime, somewhere, God spoke to you and said, "Give me your life and let me do something glorious through you"? And you have fought against and resisted that calling. The Protestant work ethic is fine if you want to make money. The hippies are all right if you're looking for self-actualization. But I've got something better. It's called Jesus. And he asks you to live out your life for him. Will you do it? Will you do it? Let's pray together. Dear Jesus, there are people here tonight who have been caught up in a success syndrome that will leave them empty. There are others here who think that if they strive to actualize their potential and live for their own self-actualization will come to a sense of ecstasy. Oh, Jesus, help each of us tonight to realize that each has been called to serve you, perhaps in a classroom, perhaps in a business, perhaps in a church as a pastor, perhaps in the community as a political leader, perhaps on the mission field, perhaps among the poor, perhaps among the oppressed. But Lord, help each person here tonight to say, Jesus, here's my life. What wouldst thou have me to do? I want you to have me and use me. I'm ready to offer myself up and ask you, Jesus, to send me anywhere, to do anything. I'm yours. For after what you've done for me, there isn't anything I won't do for you. God bless you. Thank you, Jesus. It's in your name I pray. Amen.